To start with the ribbed collar, we will put a slip knot onto our crochet hook and then chain 6. And now we are going to slip stitch into the second chain from the hook and into the next stitches as well. So we will be slip stitching 5. That's row 1 of our slip stitches, and now we will turn and chain 1. And I do like to kind of pull that chain down a little just because I feel like it keeps my edges nicer. And then now we want to slip stitch across again for 5 slip stitches, but we always want to be working in that back loop. So if you look at a stitch and it has the V, the front loop is closest to you and the back loop is farther away. So we will simply slip stitch 5 across. And this is always a bit more fickly on those first few rows because we don't have much fabric to hang onto. It's just in our fingers. As it gets bigger, it gets a little bit easier. But this is kind of a longer process because it's slip stitching, but I think the look is well worth it. Now that we've gone to the end of that row, once again, we will simply turn and chain 1. And once again, in those back loops, slip stitch 5. We will continue to do this for however many rows you need for the size that you are working. And I want to show you here, I have a sample already for the size that I'm making. So once you slip stitch, it creates this nice ribbed looked fabric. It does have some give and some stretch. So for me, I just have 2 more slip stitch rows left. So you kind of see how it works up once we have most of it done. Feel free to push pause and do this part. I know it takes a little bit to get all these slip stitch rows completed. And now that I have the amount of rows that I need, and one quick trick here, an easy way to count these is every single line you see here that is like that popping ribbed part, that counts as 2 rows. So you can always count 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and right here would be 10 rows. And that's an easier way to count across to realize where you are in your rows. It can be easy to lose track. Now that I've got the rows I need, I'm going to join these together. I'm going to bring the 2 ends together here. And I am going to chain 1. And now I'm going to slip stitch into this back loop. I'm going to insert my hook into the back loop like I was still working it. And then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to insert my hook into the back loop of that first row as well. And I'm going to slip stitch this. Now this row I really like to make tight. I'm going to once again insert my hook into the next stitch through the back loop and then go ahead and do the same for the starting row and do that across 4, 5, and this one slip stitch a bit tighter. We won't need to work back into these slip stitches. So now that I've gone across, we've joined this, and on this side, I don't always like the way that looks. So we are going to flip this, and you can see that other side blends in a lot nicer. So now we will be working our very first round. I'm going to go ahead and I would weave in this tail end to get it out of the way. And for now, I'm just going to kind of tuck it. If I were you, I would take the time to weave it in. I'm going to get set up and untangled here. So now I'm going to be working around one edge of this neck line to start building up the sweater. I think it looks great if we first work a slip stitch round. To do this, don't slip stitch too tightly, but I would chain one. That's what we're going to do. And then we are going to slip stitch for every row. Some of these will have an increase pretty soon, but just for this slip stitching, we are going to slip stitch one slip stitch along the edge for every single row that we did the ribbing. And this is going to create a nice edge for us to work back into in a minute. Now that I've worked a slip stitch edge all the way around, I'm going to join to the very first slip stitch in this round. And then I'm going to chain one. And we are going to work half double crochets around this, but we are going to do those in a unique way. The first one will work in the back loop. And the next one, we're going to work it into the front loop. And this is going to make a unique texture. We're just going to work a half double crochet in the back loop and a half double crochet into the front loop. This makes a really fun kind of, I don't know, crunchy texture, I guess. Just a bit more texture to that half double crochet than there was before. So, and you just keep going back and forth, working the back loop and then the front loop. And if you do have to increase anywhere for your size, you would simply place 2 half double crochets into the back loop or the front loop and just increase into the same stitch as you normally would. We're just using the back loops and the front loops alternatively. And when I get to the last stitch in the round, then after that I will slip stitch to the first half double crochet stitch in the round to join. Now here's where we are going to turn, chain one, and we are going to work into our first stitch, not that slip stitch to join, but the first stitch in this round. We're going to skip the first stitch and work a half double crochet into the next. And now we're going to work a puff stitch into our first skipped stitch. We will yarn over, insert our hook into the stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. Now you want to pull up your height because we want these to be puffy. Let's do that again. We yarn over, insert back into that same stitch, yarn over and pull up another loop. One more time, yarn over into the same stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. We have 7 loops on the hook, and now we will yarn over and pull through all of those loops. And then we'll repeat that again. We'll skip the next stitch and then half double crochet into the next. And now we are going to work a puff stitch into our skipped stitch. So yarn over and insert your hook, yarn over and pull up a loop. Do that 2 more times. And then we will yarn over and pull through all the loops. And we keep repeating that all the way around. Skip a stitch and then work the next. Half double crochet and then puff into the skip stitch. Keep working that all the way around for some nice puff stitches. And now I'll work my last 2 stitches. And I've made it around. And now I will do a slip stitch to the very first stitch in the round, which is not your puff stitch. It's this half double crochet. And once again, we are going to turn and chain 1. Now we will be repeating that round again. So we will skip the first stitch and half double crochet into the next, and then puff stitch. So we're doing the same thing again. So I hope as you're working this up, you can see where this is going and you are as happy with it so far as I am. I absolutely love how these puff stitches almost look like a braid that lean one way. And as you keep going, I think this is going to have a beautiful result that you will really enjoy. At the end of the puff stitch round, we will join with the slip stitch, and then just like before, we will turn. Now we're going to go back to working half double crochets. If you've noticed, I've done another section because I wanted you to see what we will be working on again. So there's lots of repeats in this. Most of the pattern is done in these half double crochet stitches in the front loop and then the back loop all the way around. But for some of it, especially when we're working the yoke, we will be doing increasing. So I want to show you how to do that. Chain one, and in the very first stitch, half double crochet in the back loop. The next stitch will be half double crochet in the front loop. Then this is our stitch pattern for the main portion of this sweater. But when we are increasing, the pattern will say, for depending on what size you're working, to increase on, say, the 7th stitch. So what you would do is you would work, oh, this is supposed to be in the back loop, you would work for 7 stitches, and when you get to that 7th stitch, you will increase by adding one more stitch into that 7th stitch space. So this would be the 7th, and I would half double crochet in that stitch again. So that increases by 1. And for some of the sizes, it will say to increase by maybe 7, then 8 alternatively. And what that does is it still increases evenly around. So we will then work the next 8 stitches, increasing on the 8th stitch. And that's the main concept behind increasing with these half double crochet stitches. You're just going to keep going back and forth, working the back loop half double crochet, the front loop half double crochet, the back loop half double crochet, and then when you get to your indicated stitch, when it's time to increase, depending on what size you're working, you simply half double crochet 2 stitches into that stitch. And that is it. So this half double crochet, once we get all the way around and we join, we will turn, increase again if needed, but eventually when we stop increasing, we are just half double crocheting in the back loop, then the front loop, all the way around, joining, turning, and doing that again. It does a lot of nice texture. You can see on both sides here, there's a lot of nice texture in doing the half double crochet that way. Now here is the beautiful thing about creating a sweater with the top-down seamless method. Once we have our yoke created, it's essentially this large circle, and it will be longer depending on what size that you're doing. But this concept for this next step is still the same. This is where we will divide for the body and the sleeves. And to do this, we will work a certain amount of stitches for the body, and then we will skip some stitches for the sleeve, work the other part of the body, skip some stitches for some sleeves. So let's get started and I will show you how to do that. Following the stitch counts for your size, simply keeping in that half double crochet stitch where you half double crochet in the back loop, then you half double crochet in the front loop. You're going to work your first set of body stitches. Now that I have worked the amount of stitches I need for the front part of the body, I'm going to chain the amount of stitches that will be under the arm. And then I'm going to skip and divide out my first set of sleeves. To do this, you will count how many stitches you're skipping. And then since I worked my last half double crochet over here in the back loop, the next stitch that I'm going to work, I'm going to skip the sleeve stitches and work the half double crochet into the front loop. So I'm still keeping with that half double crochet stitch pattern, but I'm chaining an amount, skipping the sleeve part, and starting again with the body count stitches for the front of the design. And now I'm going to continue working the next set of stitches in the pattern, half double crochet pattern, across here until I get to the point that I will divide for the second sleeve. And now that I've worked the amount of stitches I need for the other side of the body, I will go ahead and do the same thing where I'm going to skip a certain amount of stitches, and the amount of stitches you're skipping should be the same as back to the beginning. So make sure that this stitch count works, and that's going to be your second sleeve. And then we're simply going to do the amount that we need to chain for this side too. And then we are going to slip stitch and join to that first half double crochet in the round. And now let me show you what this looks like. So now it doesn't lay quite as flat because we're changing the shape here by skipping those sleeve stitches. And now it's going to start looking more like a sweater. So now we have the spots designated for our sleeves, and we have our body stitches here. Now I will continue turning each round, joining and turning, and working the half double crochet stitches along this body area and building the body length down the torso. At the very bottom, we will come back and I'll show you how to do the ribbing across the bottom. And then after that, we will later come back and work these sleeves. So the next part's quite relaxing. We're working in that half double crochet stitch pattern. The next round, you'll work into these chain stitches all the way around and back to the beginning, join, turn, work all the way around and back to the beginning, and keep building that body out into this beautiful half double crochet pattern. And I just want to really quickly show you that we've just joined, and when we're turning, we're actually going to start working into these chain stitches right away. We're going to turn and chain one. And when working into these chain stitches, I know it's hard to do the front loop, back loop, but just do the best you can. And the main thing is just to stick in the pattern, especially when you get to these other half double crochet stitches. So we will half double crochet across all of these chain stitches. And if you just want to half double crochet them all without trying to do the front loop and back loop with a chain stitch, that's fine. It's underneath the arm. The next row will add some texture back in there that it's really not that big of a deal. And then just continue along the other stitches, and you'll work the chain stitches on the other side in the same way and join back at the beginning, and then turn and do the same thing again and again. This is the fun, relaxing part where we don't really have to look at the pattern. It's just the same stitch repeat over and over to build out that beautiful textured body. Now that we have the length of the body completed, and I just want to do a quick note that if you wanted to make this longer or shorter, the nice thing about the top-down sweaters is you can try them on as you go. And if you would prefer this to be longer or shorter, with this pattern, it's very easy to simply continue to add those half double crochet rows in this textured pattern. For me, I am ready to add this bottom ribbing, and to do so, I wanted to show you how that is worked. So after the last round, we will go ahead and chain 7 or however many chains you want for your size. And once again, this ribbing can also be adjustable. So if you wanted to do more or less ribbing, feel free. And it's actually chain 8 because we will be working 7 stitches. So after you chain 8, into the second chain from the hook, do a slip stitch. Now keep the slip stitch somewhat loose. You don't want these tight when you're working into them again. And if you need to, go up a hook size. And then simply slip stitch into all stitches across. So 7 total stitches slip stitched. And now that I've got those 7 stitches slip stitched, I will do a slip stitch into this next stitch and then also into the next. So I'm doing 2 stitches from the body, and then I will turn and we're going to work our way back across this ribbing part, but we are going to skip those 2 slip stitches from the body and we are going to start working into the 7 stitches that are our ribbing. And once again, we're going to work into the back loop this time, so the back loops only, and we are going to slip stitch 7. So all of these slip stitches from here on out will be worked into that back loop. Now this is a method I really like to use when I don't want to make my ribbing separate and sew it on later, or if I'm not at the point where it's possible to work the neck how we did. So I will use this on hats and stuff too, and I find it works quite nicely. So now that I've got 7, I will chain 1, turn again. So there is kind of a lot of turning going on here, but it's not too bad. And now I will work in the back loops and slip stitch those 7 and then 2 from the body. And just be sure to keep your tension somewhat loose here, because you really don't want to make them so tight that it's really difficult to work into, because that will make you feel very, very frustrated. And if it is getting to be too tight, you might want to just take a quick break or also go up a hook size. And now that I've got the 7, once again, I'm going to slip stitch into the next 2 stitches from the body. I don't want those to be too loose since we are skipping them as we turn and work our way back down this ribbing. So skip the 2 stitches from the body and in the back loop, slip stitch across. And that's it. This is the steps you repeat for the entire way around. And then we will join this together in the end the exact same way that we did the neck portion, where we will join in the back loops. And so go ahead and do your ribbing, and after the ribbing, we will be moving on to the sleeves. Once we have the rest of our body and our bottom ribbing worked, now we will go back and work the sleeves. I've already worked this side so that you can see where we are headed. I really like the way the stitch helps not to have any of those seams showing or anything like that. I actually have a seam underneath here, and it's really hard to see where that seam is at. So we're going to do the same thing on this side. When we start our sleeves, we will take our yarn and we will attach it to the stitch in the middle that will be underneath our arm, just because we do want to hide any imperfections in a seam underneath the arm. So we will simply attach the yarn and then we're going to chain 1, and we are going to work around this opening for as many stitches as the pattern calls for, and we will still be working in that half double crochet texture stitch. But the last round that we worked, we had this right side facing us. So what we will need to do is first turn our work, and yours might be different depending on what size you're making. So I just want you to be conscious and make sure that when you continue on, you know if you are working on the right side or the wrong side for this round that will be underneath the arm. for the size that I am doing, which is the small size, I am working on the wrong side. And then I just continue on doing that half double crochet in the back loop and the half double crochet in the front loop. And it is simply that all the way around the stitches of the opening of the arm. Just when you get done with this round, double check that you have the correct amount of stitches, because sometimes when you get to these corners, things can look a little wonky simply because we separated there, and you don't want to be placing any extra stitches or missing any stitches. And then when you do get to the corners where it might feel like it's a bit loose between our stitches, you'll simply keep working. And if there's any holes afterwards, because occasionally underneath that arm, when we work sweaters in this way, there might be some small holes right here on these corners. You can see that this kind of stretches out a little bit as I was working it. And so we want to make sure that that hole is closed. But I want to show you another trick. You don't have to wait till the very end. If this is very loose, I can simply work a decrease here to pull some of these stitches together and to grab some other strands. And what that does is that allows for that hole to all of a sudden disappear. But I'm not decreasing any stitches. I'm simply just decreasing the strands in that area so that there is no gap or hole. There still is one kind of right here that I'll just prefer to sew in later, but it definitely helped that out. And then you just continue around. And then with each row you do, it's just like we worked the body. You'll simply join, turn, and work that half double crochet stitch. And so we're just simply working this area just like we did in the round for the body bottom part, all the way down. We're not going to be decreasing on our way down because we really do want to have this puffy style sleeve. So there's no decreasing, which makes it super simple. You're just going to do the half double crochet in the rounds, turning every round all the way to the bottom, and then I will come back and show you how to do this decrease and cuff. Now that we have the length that we need for the sleeve, we are going to do one row of decreasing where we will decrease by half double crocheting 2 together around. So I still will turn and chain 1, and then on this row I am going to half double crochet 2 together. Now I am still going to be going by the same stitch pattern where I'm working in the back loop then the front loop, but I'm going to work in both back loops. So I'm going to put my hook through the first back loop and then my hook through the second back loop, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and complete that half double crochet 2 together. So let's see that again, but on the front loop. So yarn over, insert your hook into the front loop of the first stitch, then again to the second stitch, yarn over and complete that stitch. So we will simply decrease this round all the way around by half double crocheting 2 together, first in the back loop and then in the front loop. And now that I'm back around, I'm going to go ahead and join to the first stitch in this round. And then once again, I'm going to turn my work because I want to have the right side of the fabric facing me for this next part. This is where we will be working ribbing in the same way that we worked the ribbing on the bottom of this beautiful sweater. We will be doing this exactly the same, and as you can see, I've got it finished over here, but I want to show you a little recap of how to do that. All right, so we will chain 10. We will chain 10 because we want 9 stitches, and it might be a little bit different for whatever size that you're doing, so be sure to chain however many you need for your size. Then we will slip stitch into the second chain from the hook and then slip stitch in the rest of the chains across. So 9 slip stitches for the size I'm working on. And once you get back to the body fabric of your sweater, this is where you will slip stitch into the next 2 stitches. Turn your work, then skip those 2 body slip stitches and slip stitch in the back loop of the 9 ribbed cuff stitches. And that's all you'll have to do, is just keep repeating those steps, working in those back loops only, doing the slip stitches. Don't do your slip stitches too tight so that they're easier to get back in here. I'll probably loosen up my tension a little bit here, I can tell. And then you'll do the rib stitching all the way around and join in the same way that we joined for that top collar, and then weave in all your ends and your sweater is ready to wear. I hope you really enjoyed this tutorial. I think this is going to be definitely one of my favorite sweaters this season. I really, really love the detail on the top, and I also like how it really is just mostly worked in half double crochet stitches, so it's a really quick crochet piece as well as stunning. Join me again next time for our next project.